All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I am Joshua Fontanilla. Let me go live really quick on Instagram and then we will get started here. Let's see here, make sure it's going. All right. I believe we are set. So, today's topic this is the first in a series of podcasts slash videos. We are on YouTube. We are on Instagram. We are on X. You can find me on all of those platforms. I will get this on Rumble also soon. I'll probably just post it there as videos afterwards. We'll see about going live there. But this is going to be the first one in a series of basically current events, news, how to understand the news. What is the news going on today? And how do you understand it in the bigger picture of Bible prophecy, spiritual events, so forth? How do you understand the news in that context? So I've entitled this one Worldview because you really need to understand my worldview and where I'm coming from. And by that, I mean a Bible based worldview, which is going to be different than what you think, at least what some of you think, in order to understand the news. So this is entitled Worldview, How to Understand the News. Let me get these slides up on the screen here. Okay. So I am going to give you a general idea of where I'm coming from, and this will create a framework for how to understand the news. So a lot of people, when they watch the news, they see current events going on, and they think, well, here's this kind of random event, and here's this other random event, and how do these things relate to each other? And what I'm going to try to show you today in this brief time, I'm going to try and keep this under 45 minutes, hopefully well under 45 minutes. What I'm going to try to show you today is that the things that you see on the news that seem like unrelated events, there is a common theme and a thread that weaves them all together. And once you understand the spiritual aspect, the aspect of Bible prophecy, how it all relates to the New World Order, all these kinds of things, then you will be able to see the news in a new way. And once you understand this, you won't need somebody like me to explain it, although I'll be happy to. But you'll be able to interpret the news and see, oh, okay, here is what the powers that be are doing, so to speak, right? So we're going to dive right into it. If you have comments, I believe I can see the comments on YouTube. If I don't see your comments coming from other platforms, please forgive me if I don't respond. I'll try and respond later. We are going live. I'm using StreamYard, and for some reason, I get the YouTube ones easily. So again, we are found on YouTube, Instagram, and X, Twitter, and Rumble. This will be posted to Rumble later also. I'm going to have to be careful how I say some of these things because I'm going to go into some controversial topics, and there is no way to say these things without insulting some people. But it is what it is. There's just, you know, people were offended by what Jesus said, right? All right. So let's get right into it. These are the topics we're going to look at today. So, worldview, how to understand the news. We're going to look at the Hegelian dialectic, which is not as complicated as it sounds. We're going to look at the King of the North versus the King of the South. By the way, I'm going to be posting all of these, the audio of all of this on all the major podcast platforms. So if you listen to podcasts on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, all that, it'll go to all of those, and you'll be able to follow this series there. So please do so, subscribe, like, share, all that kind of good stuff. So the Hegelian dialectic, the next topic we're going to look at is the King of the North versus the King of the South. And those who are Bible students, students of prophecy, will recognize this from Daniel chapter 11. Now, if somebody could tell me in the comments if the audio is good on this, I would greatly appreciate that before I go too long. I'm going off of the visual of what they have here on StreamYard, and it looks fine to me. So, but it's always, you know, people's audio on their end might look different. So give me some feedback. Let me know how the audio sounds, if it's too loud, too low. Okay, so the next topic, war in heaven, Satan versus Christ. What is the great battle that's going on behind the scenes between Christ and Satan? How does it relate to world events? And the last one we're going to look at is church versus and church and state issues. So worldview, again, is the title here. How to understand the news. And the picture I have is of the planet, and it's really about your perspective, how you see the world, that changes the way that you understand the news. Okay. And so here's another picture of the globe, and this is meant to be a metaphor, obviously. The way that you view the planet changes the way that you understand the news. So let's dig right into it. The Hegelian dialectic. We'll start there first. The Hegelian dialectic. So left versus right is the main political battle that we see in the world today, especially in America, but we see it played out in other countries as well. And what you have on your screen there, for those who are listening, is a Venn diagram. And on one side, you know, those diagrams where it's two circles and they're overlapping in the middle. One on the left, one on the right, and the one on the left says Democrats, the other one on the right says Republicans. And the idea of a Venn diagram is to show, hey, the circle on the left, there's things that are exclusive to that circle or that group. So the positions that the Democrats have, versus on the right, there's the side, the issues that the Republicans like. And then in the center where they overlap, those are the things that they agree on. And that's really what I'm trying to get at with the Hegelian dialectic. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's really all about having two sides, two opposing sides, but what really matters is what they agree on. So think of it this way. And this is going to lead to the king of the north versus the king of the south, by the way. This is a way to understand the world, and you've probably heard this general idea before of left wing versus right wing, but it's all the same bird. That's kind of a cliche, but there's some truth to it. But the Hegelian dialectic goes even deeper than that. Now, I'm using that as a very general term. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying everyone on the left and everyone on the right, they're all on the same team. I don't mean it that to oversimplify it that way. But there is some truth to that. And it, sadly, a lot of them, right? Not all, but a lot of them kind of fall into that category of being on the same uniparty. But the Hegelian dialectic takes it deeper than that. And we'll come back to this slide. The Hegelian dialectic is basically a way of viewing the world by seeing conflicts in the world as thesis versus antithesis or antithesis, one side versus the other. And the goal of the powers that be is not necessarily for one side to win versus the other. The goal is actually for a synthesis of the two sides. So, to go back to our Democrat versus Republican slide. And this is just, again, for those on the podcast, just a Venn diagram of Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other, two circles, where do they overlap? Think about it this way. No matter who gets into office, no matter which party rules Congress, House, the Senate, both of them, one of them, whatever, there always seems to be certain things that get passed. Certain laws get passed. Certain things, Chuck Schumer and majority or Mitch McConnell, there's certain things they happen to agree on. Those are the things that the uniparty are in alignment on. So there's things on the left that are strictly leftist issues. And I'm speaking today in 2024 because what were leftist issues, in the 1960s, for example, completely different. We know that they've changed a lot. I used to be a leftist back, well, at least a Democrat. I don't know if I'd call myself a leftist, but I was a 90s Democrat, back in the day when they were sane. Now it's the party of insanity in America. But there's things today that they stand for that are strictly theirs, that they own, right? You know, the social justice stuff and uh, generally speaking, right? The Black Lives Matter stuff, the abortion stuff. You know, when it comes to the war in the Middle East, generally having the position, and it depends, right? Because there's different factions in their party, but generally having the position of being kind of the pro-Palestine side, right? Things like that. There's the union position, all that kind of stuff. Being, you know, pro-regulations and all these kind of things. That's left stuff, right? Abortion, right? Did I mention that? On the right, there's issues that the Republicans generally support. And to be clear up front, I consider myself at least ideally a conservative. So just let you know where I stand. But I think when we come to political parties, that's a whole nother subject because there's corruption on both sides. One side's insane. The other side, at least there's some good policies there, but also corrupt. So it is what it is. But when we're talking about positions that Republicans generally have, we have things like being pro free markets, you know, pro capitalism, pro military, pro anti abortion or pro life, right? Those are those kind of issues. But when you look at the overlap, the things that they agree on, that's the stuff that actually really matters to the powers that be. And that's going to be like endless war funding, right? Or spying on Americans, things like that. They always seem to somehow pass those laws that erode our civil liberties, right? Things like that. There always seems to be enough political support to get funding for some foreign war or to take away Americans' freedoms, to spy on them more, to help out major corporations, corporate welfare, all that kind of stuff. They may yell at each other back and forth, but those laws somehow always get passed, right? So the idea of the Hegelian dialectic is it really left versus right? Well, there's a synthesis in between the two. And we see this kind of playing out throughout the world today, but it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that in the Hegelian dialectic. Don't think just terms of left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. I want you to think really bigger picture than that. Generally speaking, right, and this is where it's going to get controversial, the right is going to align more with the church today, right? The churches. Christianity, it's often called the religious right. The right is going to align more with them. And the left is going to generally align more with atheism, communism, that kind of stuff. That just generally speaking, there are exceptions, I know, but generally speaking, the left is going to align more with communism, socialism, atheism, that kind of stuff. So this is where we get into the king of the north versus the king of the south. So keep in mind this idea of left versus right, thesis versus antithesis, and what you really want is a synthesis. And now we're going to move on to the king of the north versus the king of the south. So there's a map here. This is where it's going to get controversial. But let me set the stage. Let me set the stage in your mind. What is the king of the north versus the king of the south? If you've read Daniel 11, which is one of the hardest chapters of Bible prophecy that anyone could try to understand, I don't necessarily recommend trying to start there to understand prophecy. I'd rather start in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 13, Revelation 17. But once you get a firm grasp on those prophecies, you can start to dig into Daniel 11. Well, I'm just going to jump straight into it because you got to understand these things in order to understand where I'm coming from, in order to understand the news and the way I'm going to explain the news in future episodes. You got to know who the players are in this left versus right, king of the north versus king of the south type of battle. Who are the players in this battle? And I would propose that Daniel 11 presents two major world powers, the king of the north versus the king of the south, and then a third player, so to speak, in the world game of world politics and the battle and that's going on in this world right now, spiritual battle as well as physical. And that third player in this game is Israel, or God's people, which in ancient times was the nation of Israel, and today is the church. So true believers, Bible believers, Christians, Bible believing Christians, though, not just not just the kind of mainstream, just well, before I step on too many toes, let me clarify. Okay, so who's the king of the north and king of the south then? Here's a map. Here's a map on the screen, and for those who cannot see it, this is just a map of, for those on the podcast, this is a map of ancient Israel and the surrounding regions. And to the left on the screen, to the left of Israel, as you're looking at the map, you see ancient Egypt. And to the right, you see Babylon. Okay? And Israel is sandwiched in between the two. Now, when Israel was attacked by either of these powers, and if you read the Old Testament, you see it's kind of like they took turns. All these different empires would attack, and the two major ones, at least kind of in more recent times in ancient Israel, was Egypt versus Babylon. And when Egypt attacked Israel, they would come from underneath. And so they were the original king of the south that Daniel 11 refers to. They would attack from the south. That's just kind of how it worked on a map. That's kind of the way you had to come. If you were going to come from Egypt and you wanted to travel to Israel to attack them, you would come from the south. I'm talking ancient Israel now, right? And Babylon, although they were to the east, to the right on the map from Israel, because of the way the geography worked with the mountains, they would come up, and the same thing would happen with Assyria, by the way, which is what is on the map here, showing the attack of Syria. Babylon would attack from the north. And so for example, in Jeremiah talks about how, the king of Babylon came from the north. And thus the king of Babylon was known as the king of the north, because when they attacked Israel, they would go up over this certain region and then come down from the north to attack Israel. So that's how it worked. So here, those are the two players. So the king of the south was Egypt, and the king of the north was Babylon. The king of the south would attack from the south, and the king of the north would attack from the north. Now, what does this have to do with left versus right in politics today? Well, and this is key to understand this point. In the Bible, the north symbolized the spiritual or religious aspect. And the reason why is because the north symbolized the place of God, heaven. North was up. North is above us. North is the heavens. And so, for example, if you want proof of this, go to Isaiah chapter 14, read verses 12 through, read about 4 or 5 verses after that. Isaiah chapter 14, starting in verse 12 around there. And you see the fall of Lucifer. And you see why Lucifer fell. And the reason why is because he wanted to take God's position. But what does it say in Isaiah when he tries to take God's position? It says that Lucifer wanted to take God's throne, and he wanted to sit in the highest parts of the north. That's the idea. God's throne is in the north. Spiritually speaking, not physically. I'm not saying God's in at the North Pole, right? Don't misunderstand me. In Israel, in ancient Israel, it's a very poetic type of mindset the Hebrews had, and so the north symbolizes the spiritual. Long story short, Babylon, the way that their religion, the way their empire worked, they sought to take the place of God. The Babylonian kings and the Babylonian religion sought to take the place of God, to usurp the throne of God, to replace the God of the Bible with the king of Babylon. And so not only did they attack from the north physically, but they became a symbol of somebody who places themselves above God. So that's why you find that in Isaiah chapter 14, I believe it was. Did I say 14? Yeah, the chapter about Lucifer. You can find it pretty easily. That's why the king of Babylon becomes a symbol for Lucifer. And so the king of the north attacks from the religious side, whereas the king of the south, if north symbolizes spiritual, the south symbolizes the opposite, earthly, the humanistic, the absence of God. In ancient Egypt, even though it had this like pantheon of gods and so forth, they sought to deny the existence of the creator God, of the Lord, of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So when Moses came to Pharaoh and demanded, "Let my people go," what was his response? "Who is the Lord? I know not the Lord," is what Pharaoh said. So the denial of the existence of the true God, while having all this weird pantheistic stuff, which is what ancient Egypt, I'm sorry, had, that is this kind of atheistic, communistic type of idea. So long story short, King of the North is the religious attacks using corrupted fallen churches to attack God's people. King of the South would be the secular, atheist, communistic attacks on God's people. And the church is sandwiched in between these two. And once you understand that battle in the world, you understand everything. The world news, current events make so much more sense. There's an attack on the church coming from two different directions, coming from corrupted churches, corrupted church leaders, and we'll talk about who I'm talking about in particular. And I'm sure you can think of some major church leaders today and major church organizations, organized churches that are just corrupted to their core. That's an attack on the church. And then on the other hand, you have the attack on God's people from the evolution, from this communist, socialist, atheistic, godless left. That's the king of the north versus the king of the south. All right. Now I'm going to give you some examples of what I'm talking about. This is where it gets controversial. And let me just say, I'm not talking about the members of these different churches. I'm not talking about the people. There are Christians, I believe, in all these different mainstream churches who are just following all the light that they know. And God knows their hearts. And I don't, God judges based on what you know. So I'm not attacking the people. I'm talking about the organizations, the hierarchy. So here is and for those who are listening, I'll describe this for you. There is a news story that just came out, and I have a screenshot of it. You'll see it on a bunch of different outlets, but this one's from the Catholic Herald. It's the headline says, all faiths lead to God. New controversy as the Pope preaches religious pluralism on the final day of his tour. So, and you could read the words from the Pope himself. Go ahead and look it up, and you will see that he just basically says, look, all the religions are the same. They're all the same. Whatever. You believe this, you believe that. It all leads to God, which is that's the opposite of what Jesus said, right? Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Like there's only one gate. There's only one way. Anyone who tries to come in some other way is a thief and a robber, right? The sheep. He's the only one who leads the sheep, and the ones who come in to steal the sheep are trying to come in some other way. He's the door, right? There's no other way. By the way, do you know Babylon and Babel, like the Tower of Babel? The word Babel means gate to God. That's what it means. So the original idea was to find an alternative route to heaven by building this tower to heaven, right? So this alternative way. Jesus is the only way. He's the ladder that leads to heaven, but they might try to build their own little tower to get there, right? So that's the very concept of Babylon. of trying to get to God some other way. So the Pope said this. Now, friends, don't just think this is Pope Francis. This goes back. A lot of popes have said this. A lot of popes have said this in recent years. And the idea of a world religion, look, if you want a world religion where everyone kind of agrees on the same stuff, this is the kind of thing you're going to say. Revelation 13, you will see that that is what's going to happen in prophecy. All the world religions are going to unite, ecumenism, unity of the world religions, and it says all the world wandered after the beast, and they all worship the beast. So that's a unified worship system, and that is what multiple popes have been leading for. If you just look, just do a search on the internet on ecumenism and the Vatican, or ecumenism and the Pope, and you will see for decades and decades, for multiple popes, that they have been pushing for this and leading the way for world religion. Unite all the different faiths. It's not just Pope Francis. You have pictures of Pope John Paul II kissing Qurans and things like that. Okay, again, I'm not attacking Catholics because I'm attacking the hierarchy, the structure, the teachings. But there's other examples. So there's another picture on my screen, and you can find pictures like this pretty easily if you search for it. But this is a pride flag hanging off of a church. I believe it's a Methodist church. I've seen these. If you go to major cities, any country, in any major city in the U.S., and find the big old churches and all the mainline Protestant churches, they're either going to have your BLM flags or they're going to have pride flags, all this kind of stuff. And you'll see the controversies where they're having gay bishops and priests and so forth, and doing gay marriages and so forth. And so this is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about when I talk about organized mainstream churches falling into this category as the King of the North, kind of all falling under that main category and leading the way on this kind of, hey, let's just unite everything here for decades now has been the papacy, the Vatican. And down the other image I have on the bottom of the screen there is a signing. This is one of many examples of a declaration, joint declaration of faith, where leaders from Methodists and Lutherans. I'm not just attacking the Catholic Church. There's lots of mainline Protestant churches are doing the same thing, but the Methodists and the Lutherans. If you're a Methodist or a Lutheran, I'm not attacking you either. I'm talking about the leadership. But you have representatives from the Methodists, from the Lutherans, from the, all these different denominations, mainstream, major, old school, mainline Protestant churches. And then you have like a Catholic cardinal, and they're all getting together, signing a declaration, where, hey, we're all the same thing. And, there was a few years ago, the Lutherans got together with the Catholics and basically said that the Protestant Reformation was a mistake. So there you go, your world unity. And there's a lot of nice people out there that says, shouldn't we just be unified? Well, read Revelation 13 carefully. And then read where Jesus says, I came not to bring peace, but a sword, right? Division. Because that's what the truth does. The truth divides. And the only way to get everyone united is to say, truth doesn't really matter. And that's where this kind of pluralism you're hearing from the Pope and from some of these other Christian leaders, that's where it comes from. It's this idea that truth doesn't really matter. All roads lead to the same thing. So that is the King of the North. And look, I don't have time to prove this to you. I'm just telling you. So if you don't agree with me, that's fine. I don't have time to prove it in this short episode here, that the King of the North is current day, the religious right, so to speak. I'm not talking about the members, average person, but the leadership. This kind of general idea of organized religion, united, and the politics that goes with it. Although there's some good stuff on that side. But I don't have time to prove it all is from Daniel 11 today. But I'll do other videos on that, and I have other videos on my platform kind of breaking down these things. And then the king of the South, again, would be the atheistic communist power. So think of it this way: the world events, the battle is between left versus right, atheism and communism on one side, atheism, communism, the secular atheist powers, communists on one side, and then on the other side is, generally speaking, the Christian powers and this, the, for lack of a better term, I hate to use the term religious right because I consider myself a conservative, but yeah, kind of that's just the simpler way to put it. And in between the two, between the battle between left versus right, the king of the north versus king of the south, in between the two is true Bible believers being attacked from both sides. Because when these people, these religious leaders, start pushing all these false teachings and having the pride flags in front of their churches and saying all faiths are the same, that's an attack on the church. The same way that pushing evolution on our kids and forcing it on our kids in public schools is also attack on Christians. It's attack on these young Christians who go to these schools and get brainwashed and then they lose their faith, right? That's how it works. All right, now to back up a little bit, and we're actually almost done here. The king of the north versus king of the south. Next issue is the war in heaven, Christ versus Satan. All right, on our screen, I have a few pictures here. Christ versus Satan, the war in heaven. There is a war between Christ and Satan. Satan is attacking Christ. Now, he tried to do it when Jesus was born, and he tried to do it multiple times. He tried to attack, he always tries to go after the church, God's people, and when Christ was on this earth, he went after Christ himself. He tries to stop Jesus. He tried to stop Jesus from surviving, from being born. If you read the story when Jesus was first born, he used Herod. So there's a picture here on the bottom right of the slaughter of the innocents, and it's basically all these Roman soldiers going and attacking the babies when they were born. So Herod, when Christ was born, all the 2-year-olds in Bethlehem, he ordered all of them got to go because Satan inspired him to get rid of Christ. That was Satan using Herod to try and get rid of Christ. This is just a kind of peeking through of the war that's going on between Christ and Satan, and it peeked through into human events. All right. Now I have a couple other images here. I'll describe them for those listening. One is of Balaam. Balaam, the prophet in the Old Testament, the mad prophet, the one who in Revelation is condemned as a sorcerer. He was a prophet, but he sold out. He wanted money more than truth, and so he tried to go against his own prophecies. He's the one that was riding the donkey, and the donkey talked to him and told him, "What are you doing?" So that's the image on the screen there that I have. Balaam, he conspired with one of the pagan kings in those days to attack God's people. And the way he did it was bringing in sexual immorality. And the idea was, look, as long as God's people are faithful to him, you can't beat them because God's protecting them. They're invincible. And so what Balaam did is he told the pagan kings, look, if you get them to sin against God, then God's protection will be taken away and you can attack them. So this is one way that Satan tries to attack the church, is by bringing in sins into the church to attack them. So when you see people in pulpits, when you see religious leaders in pulpits telling you that, hey, how you live does not matter, that is Satan using men to attack the church. Plain and simple. That's how it works. And then this last image I have here is of the death of William Tyndale. And this is an artist depiction of when he was burned at the stake. and he was burned at the stake for the simple act of translating the Bible into a language the common people can understand, and then dispersing these Bibles all over the place. And for that, the church, the church had him burned at the stake, just giving the Bibles to the people. So you can see that Satan has used pagan powers and even false prophets, and he has even used the organized church throughout history to attack true believers. So you see how this works? He will use communists. We know what the communists did in China to the church during the 60s and during the Maoist revolution, how they attacked the Christians. But then during the Dark Ages, where it was illegal to have a Bible, Satan used the church. So he'll use the king of the south, he'll use the king of the north. Either way, and the attack is on true Bible believing Christians. That is how that once you understand that, then all this left versus right stuff starts to come into play, or it starts to become clear what's going on, what's really going on in the news. All right, final issue. Final issue. I'm going to wrap up with this. This is church versus state issues. Now, I have said that I'm a conservative, right? I've said that the one side is crazy, the left is crazy. The right, at least they have good principles, but corrupt. The leadership is corrupt, not the people. I'm not talking about the people, because I consider myself a conservative. I'm not condemning myself here. But the problem that often happens on the right is because the left is so insane, because the left has swung so far, so radically, that now what we are seeing in America is and all over the world really, is a swing back the other direction, and the swing will go too far. So what you're seeing today is this push toward trying to get morality back into government, which generally speaking I would agree with. We need moral laws. There's nothing wrong with having moral laws. Don't misunderstand me. But where it goes too far is where the details of religion, faith itself, not just moral laws, but faith itself, when that gets enforced by law, then you got a problem. And the way that you can figure out the difference between the two is actually pretty simple. God put it in the Bible. It's the 10 Commandments. There was, a lot of you know this, they were on 2 tables of stone. 2 tables, not just one, 2 tables. The first table was the first 4 commandments. And it's not, and you don't split the 10 Commandments 5 and 5 on the 2 tables, because the first 4 were longer, much longer. So the first 4 fit on the first table of the 10 Commandments, especially the 4th commandment was very long. And the first commandment's long too. So the first table, the first 4 commandments, which is summarized by the greatest commandment, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all your heart, all your soul, with all your might. That's the summary of the first 4 commandments. The first 4 commandments are all about your relationship between God and man. That cannot be forced by the state. It should not be forced by the state. That's a personal issue between you and God, because once you start enforcing that, you start having what happened in the Dark Ages, where you say, look, you're worshiping the wrong way. And now the church is going to attack other Christians because they don't like the way they're worshiping. The second table of the 10 Commandments is what should be forced by law. So that are things that have to deal with you and your fellow man. So things like adultery, that should be forced by law. There should be laws against things like divorce, no fault divorce, things like that, right? Or murder, right? We should have laws against abortion. Things like theft, the basic stuff, right? That's the second table of the 10 Commandments. Those are the laws that have to deal with your relationship between you and your fellow man. That should be enforced by law. The first table of the 10 Commandments, don't force that, because now you're going to start stepping on people's toes and what they actually believe. We can all agree with, hey, let's make laws. I'm all for laws against gay marriage, ban it. laws against abortion, laws against, like I said, no fault divorce. I think that was one of the biggest things that's been destroying this country, destroying families for decades now in America. But once you start coming in and saying, you can't, here's some blasphemy laws. You can't say this against the faith. Well, who decides what's true and what's blasphemy? They accused Jesus of blasphemy, right? They did. So that once you start enforcing that, well, you might end up condemning the disciples of Christ himself, right? So you have to be very careful with that. And I don't think government should get that involved in the details of religion. That's why we have the First Amendment. And I don't think I trust Mitch McConnell's buddies to enforce what's true religion and what is not. All right. That is pretty much it I have for worldview. So once you understand these basic concepts, then you will understand where I'm coming from and how to understand the news. I will go into this in more detail, and you'll see that these themes come up again and again as we look at current events. That's it for today. I said I wanted to get this done in 45 minutes. We're at 41. So we did it. I will be posting this on a podcast version on all the major platforms. Find me on YouTube, X, Rumble, Instagram. Follow, like, share, all that good stuff. I appreciate it. Take care. God bless, and I will see you again soon.